Hi gang, so with the new Horus Heresy box set on the horizon, actually on the horizon for months now, a lot of people are going to start wondering exactly how much their planned new Legion all-resin Forge World army might cost them. But if you don't want to break the bank, well, there are loads of plastic 40k kits that are completely appropriate for use in the Heresy era, from vehicles to regular Marines. Yeah. So in this video, I'm going to do a bit of community service and save you money by listing them all. Okay, so if you're thinking of starting a Horus Heresy Legion army, well, a quick look at the Forge World site might be enough to put you off. The Forge World Heresy range is an absolutely amazing collection of models, but the price point even for basic infantry units is really high, even compared to regular Games Workshop models. And Heresy armies tend to be big, so you might want to spend your hard-earned resin credits on the Primarchs, fancy Legion-specific units, and centerpiece tanks rather than on the rank and file. Thankfully, while none of the modern Primaris kits can be used in Heresy, a lot of older 40k Marine models are listed in the fluff as being used in the Heresy era. The justification is usually that the Forge World model is the more advanced version, but the technology for it was lost over time. This mostly applies to vehicles, so let's start our list there. The Rhino is the standard Heresy-era way of shipping your Marines around, and in the time of the Heresy, the Mark 1C Demos pattern Rhino was the state-of-the-art metal box to be seen in. But the regular old 40k Rhino, the Mark 2C Mars pattern, was equally as common. Its systems just apparently weren't as advanced as that of the Demos. So there you go, that's an easy 15 quid save straight away, more like 20 if you get it from an independent store. But that also means that a lot of the Rhino variants are usable in 30k too. Both patterns of Predator, the Whirlwind and the Vindicator kits are all fine for use in 30k. Forge World makes some additional 30k patterns of these vehicles, like the Whirlwind Scorpius or the Vindicator Laser Destroyer, but the standard loadout you get in the plastic kits is also an option in the 30k army list. However, while we're on Rhino vehicles, Hunters, Stalkers and Razorbacks were all invented post-Heresy in the fluff, so none of that's an option for your 30k army. They're just not in the army list. This does mean that you might be better off buying the Chaos Rhino instead of the Imperial one, because the spiky sprue might be more useful for the Crusade era force you're building rather than another Razorback turret. And given how Primaris focused 40k Marine armies are nowadays, this means you might be able to pick up these much cheaper second hand, and if you're doing that, bear in mind that all the original 90s Mark 1B Rhino models are both legal and appropriate for Heresy use, which includes all their variants. I really like using these models, all my Marine armies have them. It's an ancient but really nice little kit, even if most eBay purchases require a lot of restoring nowadays. Finally, it's worth mentioning the plastic Adeptus Sororitas Rhino is a nice halfway house between the Mars and the Demos patterns, but it might require a few spare parts or conversions to remove all that sisters iconography. Right, that's the Rhinos done. Let's move on to the next classic Marine vehicle, Land Raiders. Land Raiders see a lot of use in Heresy, where the standard 40k plastic kit is referred to as a Phobos Land Raider, to set it apart from the Forge World resin Proteus Land Raider and the mixed plastic and resin Achilles Land Raider. Your standard 40k Land Raider can only be taken with the las cannon options, so 40k Crusaders and Redeemers can't be used in Heresy. They have most of the same upgrade options as 40k, including Havoc launchers. In fact, pretty much all the tanks in Heresy have access to Havoc launchers, another reason why you might want to get the Chaos kit. Moving on to fast attack, land speeders are also around in Heresy. Like everything else, there are 30k specific variants, but the regular plastic land speeder is also in use, though there's no option for the Typhoon variant. There's also no Landspeeder Storm or any of those weird Dark Angels ones. Similarly, while there are Heresy bike models, the standard Space Marine bike and attack bike are usable, as well as, presumably, Chaos bike and Scout bike models. Though with all these fast attack options, we might run into a problem with the guys riding them, who aren't exactly wearing the latest 30k spring-summer range, but more on that later. Lastly, in vehicles, the drop pod is literally the same model. That's a standard drop pod used in Heresy, with the slight caveat that in Heresy, you tend to either have them for the entire army or not at all. If you wanted to field individual drop pods, you'd need to use the fancy Heresy versions. But it's worth mentioning that a very common thing to do with plastic drop pods is just to stick the fins on backwards and use them as Dreadclaws, saving yourself £45. Is it an official Dreadclaw model? No. But it's also everywhere. It's a pretty normal thing to see on Heresy tables. Next up is Dreadnoughts. Now, Games Workshop already make one plastic Heresy-era kit for these in the form of the plastic Contemptor. But if you want more options, regular box dreads are also totally fine for use in 30k. And they have their own army list entry with way more options than a 40k dread gets, including autocannons and the ability to double up on pretty much any weapon and call it a mortis. But all the standard options in the Dreadnought and Venerable Dreadnought kits are there too, so those two kits are usable. The 30k listing also includes options for Flamestorm cannons, Siege Wreckers, Chain Fists, and Hunter Killer missiles, which means that as well as the plastic Ironclad Dreadnought being totally legal, all the old Forge World Mark IV Dreadnoughts and the Siege Dreadnought could be used too. Stepping down the armour size a bit, we get to Terminators, and like Dreadnoughts, Games Workshop already produced two Heresy-era plastic kits in the form of Tartaros and Cataphractii Terminators. However, if you want more options than that, regular 40k Terminator armour called Indomitus armour was around in the Heresy period and is fine for use in 30k games. This gives us the standard Terminator squad and the Assault Terminator kits, although it's worth saying that only certain legions have access to Storm Shields in Heresy, so you might be assembling those Assault Terminators with grabby claws only. One slight complaint you might see is about this thing, the Crux Terminatus that's on the shoulder of modern Terminators, which in-world is meant to contain a fragment of the Emperor's armour from his final battle with Horus, and is thus a post-Heresy thing. But that's kind of a myth even in world, and similar symbols were used to denote veterans amongst the legions, so I don't really think it's a problem. You can always swap out that shoulder pad if it bothers you. And before we hit a load more issues like that, let's mention the scout kits. In Heresy, you don't have scouts, but you do have Legion reconnaissance squads who can either operate in power armor or recon armor, which is 4+ save scout armor, and they have access to all the options that come in the scout boxes. So despite them not looking like grizzled Heresy Marines, yeah, the scout kits are good to use. Right then, regular Marines. This is the usual contentious point when talking about what models to use in Heresy. If you didn't know, Space Marines have worn different variants of power armor, and in the background those happened over a period of time, and some of them are more accurate to 30k than others. Now, Games Workshop produced plastic kits for Mark III and Mark IV Space Marines, which were the most common marks at the start of the Heresy. They're also the same price as a tactical squad, so this just might not be an issue. However, if you're sitting on a pile of old Mark VI or Mark VII 40k Firstborn, and I think a lot of people are, there are ways you can use them in the Heresy. Officially, both Mark VI and Mark VII armour, which the 40k Firstborn Marines wear, were used in the Heresy, but just really late on, like during the Siege of Terror. And no one really ever does events set in the early, mid or late Heresy. This isn't World War II, so both these armour marks are usable. In fact, the upcoming box is shown as being Mark VI models. There's a slight contention with the chest icons on Mark VII armour. The Imperial Eagle was a relatively common thing in the Heresy, but not as common as in 40k, and a specific version of it, the Palatine Eagle with upturned wings, was restricted to the Emperor's Children Legion. But that doesn't really affect your choice of Mark VII armour, and this thing, the Imperialis, became a loyalist symbol during the Heresy, so it might be a bit weird to have traitors with it on. But really, it's not that the models themselves are wrong, it's more that they just look really 40k, and Heresy has a bit of a different aesthetic. This can be overcome, though, with a bit of kit bashing and conversion. The Imperium in the Heresy was way less homogenous than in 40k. Lots of Forge Worlds produced their own local variants of things, like armor marks or helmets, that weren't seen in other parts of the galaxy, and in the background, the systems used to develop Mark 6 and 7 armor were field tested in other marks or by other Forge Worlds before that armor was officially given a designation. Like many things in Warhammer, this fluff is included to encourage conversions and allow players to come up with their own backstories. So with a bit of kit bashing, most obviously head or chest swaps, mixing in some chaos bits, which are often based on old Heresy armor, even mixing in third-party bits, a pile of 40k Firstborn sprues can be heresified pretty easily. In fact, I'd say that your army being composed of a mix of bodged together armor marks is way more accurate than all of them turning up in pristine matching Mark III. It's a galaxy-wide civil war. My Heresy word bearers are built from a mix of Anvil Industries and Max Mini bits, plastic Mark IV and Mark VII parts, and I think they look pretty Heresy. This also opens a load of 40k veteran and character model kits, because they're often wearing relic artificia or unique armour anyway. The Vanguard, Sternguard and Company Command boxes, as well as Chaplains, Tech Marines and this Masters of the Chapter set would all fit pretty easily into a Heresy army, as well as many of the Terminator character models. With a bit of work, I think you could get most 40k Marines to fit. Right, anything I've forgotten? Space Marines in 30k have access to more artillery than in 40k, including the Basilisk. There's a Forge World version available, but I don't see why using the Astra Militarum version with Space Marine crew would be a problem. As I said, there's lots of different marks of these things. And speaking of Astra Militarum, if we journey outside the 30k Space Marine books, most of the Astra Militarum range, in fact most of the Games Workshop's standard human range, could be pressed into service as a militia and cults army. You can also find uses in Heresy for navigators, the assassins, servitors, tech priests, and many other Imperial agent sort of models. Heresy also features a Mechanicum army list, but that doesn't have a lot of crossover with the 40k AdMech range. But there are still things you can do. Character models fit everywhere, and using Skitarii as Heresy-era tech thralls is probably fine. If you're willing to do a bit of conversion, there's loads of options there. Anyway, there's the list. Hopefully this is useful. All the modern 40k plastic kits that you can use in Heresy, and some that you could easily convert to be usable in Heresy. Build your army around these, and save your pennies for the big guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, well, I've got loads more, some about the Heresy, some about the background, and some about modelling in general. There's also a very simple Patreon at the link below. See you next time.